Amara stood before the mirror in the bridal salon, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at her. The white lace bodice clung perfectly to her frame, while the long train spilled across the polished floor like a river of snow. For a fleeting moment, she felt like the princess she had once dreamed of being. Her mother's reflection appeared behind her, hands warm as she adjusted the veil. "Amara, you look exactly the way you imagined when you were little," she whispered, her voice trembling with pride. Amara smiled faintly, remembering being 10, draping curtains over her shoulders and declaring she would marry a prince one day. Now here she was, and Daniel Whitfield was supposed to be that prince. For 3 years, Daniel had been steady, attentive, and every bit the man her parents admired. He never missed a holiday dinner, always brought flowers, and always shook her father's hand with confidence. To her family, he was perfect. To Amara, he was the man who had promised to make her the happiest woman alive. As the seamstress pinned the final hem, her mother clasped her hands. "Tomorrow, you'll be the most beautiful bride in Savannah," she said, eyes glistening. Amara pressed her palms to her chest, trying to slow her heart. She told herself this pounding was joy, just joy, nothing else. On the ride home, they reviewed the wedding list. Flowers delivered, cake ready, musicians confirmed, restaurant prepared for 40 guests. Her mother ticked items off with the precision of someone who had orchestrated every detail. "And the honeymoon?" she teased. Amara laughed softly. Daniel had insisted on keeping that part a surprise. Something unforgettable, he had said. She clung to that word like a charm. Everything was in place, and the whole town buzzed about how the Mitchells and Whitfields would finally be joined. Yet, as familiar streets rolled past, unease rippled through her. Her hands trembled. "Too perfect," whispered her mind. Back at home, Amara carefully hung the gown in her closet, letting the silk brush her fingertips one last time. Tomorrow, that dress would carry her to the altar. Her mother was in her room, folding linens into the cedar chest that had been saved for her since childhood. "Amara," she said gently, "are you truly ready for married life?" Amara laughed a little too quickly. "Mom, Daniel and I have talked about everything. He wants children, and so do I. We'll live in his apartment until we can buy a bigger place. It will all work out." Her mother nodded, clearly pleased, then reminded her of what her father had prepared. The downtown condo already signed over in her name, the new car waiting in the driveway, the savings account set aside to help them start. It was the kind of dowry whispered about in Savannah. Amara nodded, but hearing it aloud made something twist inside her. "Mom, I don't care about any of that," she said, sitting on the bed. "What matters is that Daniel and I love each other." The words came easily, but as soon as they left her mouth, doubt crept in. She remembered those moments over the past year that hadn't made sense. The times he didn't answer her calls until hours later, claiming he was busy. The quick way he slid his phone back into his pocket when she walked into the room. The late nights with friends, always the same excuse. And then there was the way he said, "I love you," or rather, how he never said it first. Always in response, never as an offering. Instead, he'd grin and call her Sunshine, as if pet names could replace real words. She shook her head, chiding herself for doubting. After all, he had proposed, hadn't he? He had planned this wedding. He was going to stand with her tomorrow, in front of God, and everyone they knew. Still, the nervous flutter wouldn't leave her chest. Maybe the trembling hands, the sleepless thoughts, the cold ache in her stomach were just part of the ritual. The phone rang, breaking her spiral. She grabbed it quickly. "Hello." "Hey, Sunshine." Daniel's voice was warm, calm, everything she needed to hear. "How's my bride-to-be? Did you like the dress?" Amara closed her eyes, letting his voice wash over her. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I can't wait for tomorrow. And I can't wait to make you my wife," he said softly. "Forever, Amara. We'll have forever." She smiled into the dark, clutching the phone like an anchor. For tonight, his words were enough to quiet the storm, at least for a little while. When the call ended, she couldn't sit still. Daniel had sounded so tender, so reassuring, that she wanted nothing more than to see him, to share the joy swelling in her. "Just half an hour," she told her mother, slipping on a light coat. The evening air in Savannah was soft and fragrant, laced with honeysuckle and the faint salt of a nearby marsh. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she cut through the familiar park. Neighbors called out blessings for tomorrow, and she waved, smiling like the luckiest woman alive. His building soon came into view, the bricks still fresh from recent painting. A sleepy cat curled in the windowsill downstairs. Amara climbed the steps 2 at a time, her heart racing, not from nerves, but anticipation. She lifted her hand to knock when voices drifted through the thin wooden door. "Mom, stop worrying. Everything will be fine." It was Daniel's voice, calm, confident, the tone he used when convincing clients. His mother's voice answered, trembling. "Daniel, are you sure about this?" "About Amara?" Amara froze, waiting for his immediate protest, his declaration of love. Instead, he chuckled low and careless. "I've told you 100 times. Amara is like a sister to me. I've just gotten used to her over the years. She's a sweet girl." The word sliced through her. Sister. Her chest tightened, but she stayed rooted, desperate for him to correct himself. "But, do you love her?" His mother pressed softly. Daniel laughed outright, a sound that made Amara's blood run cold. "Love, Mom, is for storybooks. In real life, you have to use your head. You've seen what her parents are giving us. The downtown condo, the car, the money, and her father's connections at City Hall. Priceless. This marriage is security, not romance." The world tilted beneath her feet. The banister dug into her palm as she gripped it for balance. Every tender smile, every whispered promise, every time he'd brushed her hair from her face, it all cracked like cheap glass around her. A deeper voice joined in, his father's, calm and approving. "She'll make a good wife. Polite, respectable, from the right family. You're making the right choice, son." Daniel's next words shattered what little strength she had left. "Besides, Samantha Brooks is back in town. Remember her? We were happy once. With her, I can have passion. With Amara, I get stability. Best of both worlds." Samantha. The name roared in Amara's ears. She remembered the woman vaguely. Dark hair, older, the kind of girl who turned heads in high school. Gone for years. And now, back, sliding into the space where her heart had once belonged. Daniel's voice dropped lower, intimate, yet still clear through the door. "I'm meeting her tomorrow morning before the ceremony, just to settle things." That was enough. Amara's body moved before her mind could catch up. Her heels clattered too loud on the stairs as she fled. Her vision blurred with tears, her breath coming in shallow gasps. 3 years of believing, 3 years of building dreams on sand. Sister, dowry, Samantha. The words hammered her skull. By the time she stumbled into the cool night air, the truth had rooted deep inside her. He had never loved her. She didn't remember how she made it back across town. One moment she was outside Daniel's door, heart in shreds. The next, she was stumbling into her bedroom, the glow of her wedding gown spilling from the half-open closet like a cruel reminder of what tomorrow was supposed to be. Her mother asked softly if she was all right. Amara forced a smile, muttered something about being tired, and slipped past her before she could see her trembling hands. The house was quiet, but inside Amara, chaos raged like a storm that would not end. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, as every moment of the last 3 years replayed in brutal clarity. The way Daniel had taken her to meet his parents far too quickly, the questions he'd asked about her father's work, his thinly veiled curiosity about the apartment deed, the savings, the car, the way he'd avoided saying "I love you" first, letting her feed him the words, and echoing them back with a smile that, in hindsight, felt rehearsed. How had she been so blind? She had built castles out of sand and convinced herself they were stone. For hours she lay there, caught between 2 unbearable choices. She could keep silent, marry him, and preserve her family's honor. The guests would smile, the photographs would hang on their walls, her parents would hold their heads high in Savannah society. But she would know. She would wake each morning beside a man who calculated her worth like a ledger, who whispered passion to another woman while calling her sister. The alternative was worse in its own way. Walking away, breaking her parents' hearts, ruining months of preparation, shaming the Mitchell name before the entire town. Near midnight, Amara dragged herself to the mirror. The woman staring back was pale, eyes swollen, lips trembling. She looked less like a bride and more like a ghost. And yet, behind the ruin, something flickered, a stubborn spark that whispered she was worth more than a bargain struck in the dark. By 4 a.m, she could no longer lie still. She opened the closet, touched the wedding dress one last time, then turned away. She pulled out a small travel bag and packed only what mattered. Her passport, some money, the envelope she had saved for the honeymoon. Her hand shook as she scribbled a note. "Mom, Dad, forgive me. I can't explain everything now, but I can't go through with this wedding. I love you, Amara." As dawn broke, she placed the note on her pillow and stood for a long moment in the doorway of her childhood room. Her heart was breaking, but beneath the devastation, a fragile strength rose like sunlight through cracked glass. She could not marry Daniel Whitfield. She would not. The sky was still bruised with the last shadows of night when she slipped out the front door with her bag. Her shoes barely whispered against the porch steps as she moved. Behind her, the house slept in silence. Her parents dreamed of a daughter walking down the aisle, not one fleeing into the dawn. The streets of Savannah were nearly empty. A milk truck rattled by. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled 6. She kept her eyes forward, clutching her bag like an anchor. The bus station smelled of diesel and coffee, its fluorescent lights humming overhead. "One ticket to Atlanta," she whispered. The cashier said nothing, just slid the paper stub across the counter. Departure, 8 a.m. 2 hours. Enough time for Daniel to meet Samantha. Enough time for her parents to find a note on her pillow. Her stomach twisted at the thought. She stepped outside, seeking air. Her hand shook as she dialed Nina. The line clicked. "Amara? What on earth? There's no wedding," Amara cut in. "Please listen. Tell my parents I'm safe, but I can't marry Daniel." There was a stunned pause. "Amara, what are you talking about? Did something happen?" "I can't explain now. Just make sure they know I'm alive." "I'm sorry. I have to go." Amara hung up before Nina's questions could trap her. The guilt came in waves. Her mother's tears, her father's fury, the shame they would feel when guests arrived to an empty altar. Her whole life, they had given her everything. And this was how she repaid them, by running. Yet another voice rose inside her, firmer, stronger. How could I stay? How could she vow forever to a man who loved someone else, who saw her as a transaction? To marry Daniel would be the greater betrayal, not just of herself, but of the family who raised her to value honesty. When the bus doors finally opened, she climbed aboard, her chest tight with fear. The seats smelled faintly of vinyl and dust. She slid into one by the window and pressed her forehead to the glass. As Savannah rolled away, her reflection stared back at her. A runaway bride with no plan beyond the next sunrise. She was terrified of poverty, of loneliness, of being swallowed by a city that didn't know her name. But beneath the fear was something sturdier, almost defiant. She had chosen truth over deception. Whatever waited for her in Atlanta, at least it would be real. The bus rumbled north, each mile carrying her farther from the life she had known. She pressed her forehead to the glass, watching the low country fade into pine forests. Her phone buzzed. Nina's name lit the screen. Amara's stomach knotted before she answered. "Amara, what did you do?" Nina's voice was frantic and hushed, as though she had ducked into a hallway to avoid being overheard. "Your parents found the note at 7. Your mom is beside herself. Your dad, he nearly called the police before I told him you were safe." Amara swallowed hard, guilt twisting inside her. "Nina, I couldn't marry him." "I know," Nina whispered. "But the guests are arriving, Amara. They're all dressed, gifts in hand, waiting at the restaurant. Daniel's there too. He's telling everyone you're sick." Nina hesitated. "But people are whispering. The neighbors are saying you ran away." The word struck like a hammer. Ran away. That was exactly what she had done. In Savannah, news traveled faster than wildfire. By sunset, the whole town would know. Your mother was crying so hard she couldn't finish a sentence, Nina continued. And your dad, he kept saying she wouldn't do this without a reason. Daniel looked pale as a ghost, Amara. He tried to laugh it off, but no one believed him. Amara closed her eyes, letting Nina's words paint the scene she would never see. The tables set with flowers and china, musicians waiting with instruments in hand, 40 guests shifting in their seats. Her parents standing before them with nothing but a crumpled note. And Daniel, cornered by whispers, his perfect reputation slipping away as neighbors leaned close to trade theories. What are they saying about me? Amara asked quietly. That you got cold feet, Nina replied. That maybe you realize something. Some even say Daniel wasn't as perfect as he seemed, Nina added with a sigh. Amara, this is going to be the scandal of the year. Amara almost laughed, though the sound caught in her throat. Then let it be, she whispered. Better a scandal than a lie. The bus hissed as it slowed into the Atlanta station. The driver called out to stop, and Amara gathered her bag with shaking hands. The city loomed outside, vast, unfamiliar, humming with a life that didn't know her story. By afternoon, while Savannah feasted on gossip, Amara walked into her new world. She handed cash to a landlady in a faded bathrobe for a tiny rented room on the edge of town, a single bed, a cracked dresser, and a window overlooking a crooked oak tree. It was nothing like the life she had been promised, but it was hers. The first night in Atlanta passed in a blur of exhaustion and nerves. She lay on a narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the muffled hum of traffic outside. By morning, reality hit her like cold water. She had no plan, no connections, no safety net at all. The only work she had ever done was in her father's office, answering phones, filing documents, a job handed to her out of family loyalty. Out here, none of that mattered. She forced herself into the streets with a borrowed newspaper tucked under her arm, circling classifieds like someone who knew what she was doing. But every posting seemed to require experience she didn't have. Her savings, meant for a honeymoon, suddenly looked like a fragile lifeline that could vanish in weeks. Fear gnawed at her ribs, but determination kept her feet moving. An internet cafe caught her eye, its windows fogged from the heat of old computers. Inside, a college kid with headphones showed her how to search job sites and fill out applications. Her fingers hovered awkwardly over the keyboard as she tried to craft a resume that sounded more substantial than it was. 3 years as an administrative assistant under her father's name. Would anyone here take that seriously? She sent out resume after resume, heart pounding with each click of the mouse. By the 10th one, her palms were slick with sweat. She felt like a fraud. 2 days later, the phone in her tiny room rang. A brisk woman's voice introduced herself from a marketing firm downtown. We received your application. Can you come in tomorrow for an interview? Amara's breath caught. Yes, of course. The next morning, she stood in front of a glass building that seemed to scrape the sky. Her knees nearly gave out as she crossed the lobby, clutching the strap of her borrowed handbag. In the mirrored elevator, she caught sight of herself. Neatly pressed blouse, hair in a careful bun, makeup hiding the shadows beneath her eyes. She looked the part, but inside, terror clawed at her. The interview room was sleek and cold, with a single glass table between her and the woman in a navy suit. The woman's pen hovered above a notepad. Tell me about your experience, she said briskly. Amara's throat went dry. She spoke about handling clients, about organizing schedules, half true, half stretched. She forced the words out steadily, even as her hands trembled under the table. When she finally finished, the woman studied her silently for a moment that felt endless. Then, to Amara's shock, the woman's tone softened. We'll start you on a 3-month probation. The salary is modest at first, but if you prove yourself, there's room to grow. Can you begin Monday? Relief flooded Amara, so hard she almost wept. Yes, she whispered. Absolutely. Walking out of the building, the sunlight felt different, warmer, sharper. It wasn't triumph, not yet, but it was a start. Her first fragile victory. For the first time since leaving Savannah, she believed she might survive here. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken beyond repair. 3 months passed in a blur of exhaustion. Amara stumbled through the early weeks of probation, terrified every mistake would expose her as a fraud. But little by little, the fear ebbed. She stayed late, double-checked her work, and listened more than she spoke. By the end of the 3rd month, her supervisor called her into the office. "You've done well," he said, smiling. "Welcome to the team." It was the first time in years she felt she had earned something entirely on her own, and that feeling filled her chest like sunlight after a long storm. That fragile sense of stability shattered the morning Daniel appeared. Amara had just settled into her cubicle when the receptionist buzzed. "There's a man here asking for you," she said. Amara stood, heart already pounding. She stepped into the hallway and froze. Daniel stood there in a pressed suit, thinner than she remembered, his face pale. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The chatter of the office blurred into silence around them. Finally, he whispered Amara. Her name on his lips sent a cold shock down her spine. "What are you doing here?" "Please," he said, voice cracking. "Just hear me out." Her jaw clenched. "You shouldn't be here. I've been looking for you for months," he continued. "No one would tell me where you went. I need to explain." "Explain what?" she said flatly. "How you were going to marry me, for a condo, and sleep with Samantha for passion." His face blanched. "You heard that. Every word." He stepped closer, desperate. "It wasn't what it sounded like. I was confused. You were calculating," she cut in sharply. "Don't insult me with lies now." Daniel flinched as though struck. Around them, co-workers slowed their steps, sensing tension. Amara forced a tight smile. "We're done here. Leave before I call security." He lowered his voice. "Please, just give me 1 hour. 1 hour to tell you everything. After that, if you never want to see me again, I'll disappear." Amara hesitated. Part of her wanted to walk away and never hear his voice again. But another part, wounded, curious, still burning, wanted answers. She exhaled shakily. "Fine. 1 hour. There's a cafe across the street. Be there in 10 minutes. The cafe was quiet, filled with the smell of coffee and warm bread. Amara sat at a corner table, hands clenched around her cup. Daniel arrived looking exhausted, dark circles shadowing his eyes. He sat down slowly, like a man carrying the weight of something heavy. "I was wrong," he began, voice raw. "Everything I said that night, it was cruel. I thought love made people weak. My parents drilled it into me that marriage is strategy, not feeling. When I met you, I told myself you were a smart choice. But you became more than that." "Then why say those things?" she asked, eyes steady. "Because I was terrified," he said simply. "Samantha was easy. She never expected anything real. But you saw me, and that scared me. My parents wanted me to secure our future. They pushed me to treat you like a deal. But his voice broke. "I loved you. I just didn't know how to say it until it was too late." Amara stared at him, anger and grief colliding inside her like storms. "You loved me," she whispered. "You were planning to meet another woman on our wedding day." Daniel dropped his head into his hands. "I didn't meet her. I swear. The moment you didn't show up, I knew I'd lost you. Samantha doesn't matter. She never did. I was a fool." Silence stretched between them, sharp as glass. "You broke me," Amara said finally, voice trembling. "You took the life I dreamed of and turned it into ashes." "I know," he whispered, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, if you let me." Her hands trembled around her cup. She couldn't tell if she was furious or hollow. She stood abruptly. Chairs scraped. "I don't know what you expected, Daniel. A hug? A second chance? You destroyed everything." "I know," he said again, eyes glistening. "But you're still the only person I've ever truly wanted." Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "Wanting me isn't enough. Respecting me should have come first." She walked out before he could reply, her heels clicking against the tile like gunshots. Outside, the air hit her like a wave. She drew in a shaking breath. For the first time, seeing him hadn't broken her. It had freed her. Amara didn't stop walking until she reached her tiny apartment. She shut the door, slid down against it, and buried her face in her hands. Seeing Daniel again had stirred every scar inside her, but something was different this time. The old part of her, the one that had begged for his love, felt distant, like a ghost she had outgrown. She had walked away, not trembling, not broken, steady. That thought echoed in her mind like a fragile victory bell. She curled up on the bed, still in her work clothes, and let exhaustion finally pull her under. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains. Amara stared at the ceiling, replaying yesterday in her mind. A knock startled her. She opened the door to find Nina standing there, suitcase in hand, and worry etched across her face. "Nina, don't even start," Nina said, pushing past her. "Your parents told me where you were. I took the earliest bus. And yes, they know you're safe, but they're still furious and heartbroken." Amara sank onto the couch. "I didn't know how to make them understand." "Then let me help," Nina said firmly, eyes softening. For hours they talked. Amara told her everything. What she had overheard, how it had shattered her, how she had run because marrying Daniel would have been the real betrayal. Nina listened silently, occasionally brushing tears from her cheeks. "You were brave," Nina said finally. "Everyone back home thinks you were reckless, but I know the truth. You saved yourself." Amara's throat tightened. "It doesn't feel like bravery. It feels like I broke everyone's heart." "Sometimes you have to break hearts to save your own," Nina said gently, squeezing her hand. "And if they love you, they'll heal." Nina stayed 3 days, coaxing Amara back into laughter. They explored Atlanta's markets, ate greasy takeout on the floor, and danced barefoot to old pop songs on Nina's phone. For the first time, Amara felt like she could breathe without the weight of judgment pressing on her chest. On the morning Nina left, she hugged her tightly. "Promise me something," Nina said. "What?" "Build something beautiful here. Not for them. Not for Daniel, for you." Amara nodded, blinking back tears. "I will." As Nina's bus pulled away, Amara stood on the curb, feeling both hollow and hopeful. The following weeks passed in steady rhythm. Amara threw herself into work, learning fast and rising quietly. She stayed late, solved problems no one else wanted, and slowly became indispensable. Her boss began trusting her with clients. Coworkers stopped looking at her like an outsider and started seeking her advice. Bit by bit, Atlanta began to feel less like exile and more like home. Still, late at night, she sometimes lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if her parents had forgiven her, or if Daniel still thought of her at all. One Friday afternoon, as she packed up her desk, her supervisor appeared. "You're good at this," he said. "We're opening a new division next quarter. I want you on the planning team." Amara blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you. You've earned it." For a long moment, she could only nod, throat too tight to speak. That night, she walked home under the glow of street lamps, the city humming softly around her. She thought of who she had been, the girl trembling in a wedding dress, and who she was becoming. She didn't need Daniel's love. She was building her own future. 2 months later, her phone buzzed with a call from her father. Amara froze. She hadn't spoken to her parents since Nina's visit. Hands shaking, she answered. "Amara," her father's voice said quietly. "Your mother wants to talk." Her mother's voice came next, trembling. "Sweetheart, are you well?" "I'm okay," Amara whispered. There was a pause. Then her mother sighed, broken but soft. "We were angry and hurt, but we've realized we would rather have you happy far away than miserable here." Tears blurred Amara's vision. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." Her mother's voice thickened. "We know. Just promise you won't disappear again." "I promise," Amara breathed. Her father came back on the line. "We love you, Amara. Always will. Come visit when you're ready." "I will," she said, crying openly now. When the call ended, she sat on the floor and wept, tears of grief, of release, of something loosening at last. That night, she slept without nightmares. When she woke, the world felt lighter, as though forgiving herself had begun with their forgiveness too. For the first time, she truly believed she belonged to herself. Spring arrived, quietly, painting the city in green. Amara's work thrived. She joined the new division's planning team, coordinating projects that challenged her and filled her days with purpose. Her coworkers began inviting her to dinners, weekend markets, and rooftop parties. She found herself laughing again. Real laughter, not the hollow kind she used to fake. Sometimes she caught her reflection in shop windows and barely recognized the confident woman looking back. She no longer thought of Daniel every day. When she did, it was like recalling a faded photograph from another life. Then, one crisp April morning, a letter arrived. The envelope bore Daniel's neat handwriting. Amara stared at it for a long time before opening it. "I won't ask for forgiveness," it read. "You owe me nothing. I only want you to know I left Savannah. I couldn't stay there without you. I'm starting over somewhere new, like you did. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like, even if I didn't deserve it. Be happy, Amara." Her hands trembled as she folded the letter. She set it aside gently, like laying a ghost to rest. Amara sat by her window for a long while after reading Daniel's letter, watching sunlight filter through the crooked oak tree outside. Instead of pain, she felt a strange stillness, a calm she hadn't known in years. He was gone from Savannah, gone from her story. The ghost of him no longer lurked in the corners of her mind. For the first time, she could think about her past without flinching. She whispered softly to the empty room, "Goodbye, Daniel." The words didn't break her. They freed her. Weeks turned into months. The planning division she had joined flourished under her efforts, and her superiors noticed. One afternoon, her boss called her into his office. "You've done extraordinary work," he said. "We want to make you a junior manager." Amara blinked in shock. "Me, yes, you," he said, smiling. She left the office dazed, heart hammering. The girl who once ran from her own wedding in tears was now being trusted to lead. That night she stood on her tiny balcony, city lights twinkling below, and whispered, "I'm proud of you," to herself. By summer, she had moved into a brighter apartment downtown. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. Every lamp, every chair, every framed print on the walls chosen by her alone. She filled the space with plants and sunlight, played soft music on Sunday mornings, and baked just to fill the air with sweetness. Her life was quiet, steady, and honest. Sometimes she thought about Savannah, not with regret but with gratitude. That city had raised her. Atlanta had rebuilt her. She had found herself between their two beating hearts. One warm evening, while she was arranging flowers on her kitchen table, her phone buzzed. It was Nina. "Guess who's engaged?" Nina squealed. Amara gasped. "No way." "To who?" "Marcus, the teacher from the market. We're planning a fall wedding." Amara laughed, genuine and bright. "That's amazing, Nina. I'm so happy for you. You'll be my maid of honor, right?" Of course, as they talked and planned, Amara felt no pang of jealousy, no shadow of old pain. She was whole enough now to celebrate someone else's joy without longing for what had once shattered her. Weeks later, she returned to Savannah for the first time. The air smelled of magnolia and sea salt, just as she remembered. Her parents met her at the station. Her mother burst into tears, clinging to her. "You're really here," she sobbed. Her father hugged her fiercely. "We missed you, kiddo." Amara smiled through her tears. "I missed you too." They drove home slowly, pointing out old landmarks. Savannah hadn't changed much, but she had. Sitting between them in the car, she realized she no longer needed their approval. She only wanted their love, and they gave it freely. They spent the weekend cooking, laughing, and sharing quiet stories. One evening, her mother took her hands. "We judged you too harshly," she said softly. "We thought you'd thrown everything away, but you were protecting your heart. We see that now." Amara's throat tightened. "I thought I disappointed you forever." "You never could," her father said. "You're braver than we ever were." For the first time, Amara felt no wedge between them, just love, warm and steady. The girl who had left in shame had returned as a woman who could finally meet their eyes. The morning she left Savannah again, her mother hugged her at the door. "Go live your life," she whispered, "and don't look back unless it's to smile." Amara smiled through tears. "I will." On the train back to Atlanta, she watched the marshes blur by. The old ache that used to tighten her chest when she thought of Savannah was gone. It had become just another part of her story, one she had survived, one she had outgrown. She rested her head against the window, feeling peace settle in her like sunlight. Back in Atlanta, Life unfolded like a garden she had planted herself. She led her team with quiet strength, earned respect, and built friendships that filled her days with laughter. On weekends, she strolled through art markets, painted her tiny balcony, and wrote dreams in a leather notebook. Sometimes, late at night, she imagined telling her younger self, "You'll be okay. You'll be more than okay." The thought made her smile every time. She had once run from everything. Now, she was running towards something beautiful, something entirely her own. On a golden autumn evening, Amara stood as maid of honor at Nina's wedding. As Nina walked down the aisle glowing with love, Amara's heart didn't ache, it soared. She had feared she would never trust love again, but watching her friend vow forever made her believe in it, not as a cage, but as a choice. After the ceremony, as laughter and music filled the garden, Nina hugged her tightly. "You look happy," she whispered. "I am," Amara replied, and realized it was true. Happiness had stopped being something she chased. It had become where she stood. Months later, Amara sat on her balcony beneath a sky freckled with stars, a cup of tea warming her hands. The city hummed softly below. She thought of everything she had lost and everything she had gained. She had walked away from a life built on lies and built a new one on truth. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She smiled faintly, whispering to the night, "I made it." And for the first time, the words didn't sound like hope. They sounded like home.